We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. The time I have on my computer is 10:01 a.m. I'd like to ask everybody to mute their microphones and only turn them on when they speak, and remind you to announce your name when you're speaking, so your names can be recorded. With that, we'll move to item B on our agenda, which is a roll call and certification of quorum. Ms. Emma Park is going to call the roll, and she will let us know we have a quorum.
Yes, sir. Dolores Campion.
Present.
Susan Smith. Flor Lujan. David Morris.
Present.
Dave Yelovich.
Present.
James Grave Jr.
Here.
And presiding officer Jerry Bittner.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Great. We'll move on to item C then on the agenda, the approval of the minutes. Now, the board members got the minutes attached to the meeting materials. Do we have any comments that anyone wants to bring up on those minutes from October the 4th of last year? Okay. Since there's no comments, I'm going to ask for a motion and a second to approve those minutes as they were presented.
I'll move. Jimmy Graves.
Do I have a second?
I'll second. Dolores Campion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ms. Clark will do a roll call vote and announce motion passes.
Thank you, sir. Dolores Campion.
Yay.
David Morris.
Aye.
Dave Yelovich.
Aye.
James Graves.
Aye.
And presiding officer Jerry Bittner.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Great. Do we have our public commenter? There was one that is supposed to be presenting us with a comment today. Is that person logged on and present, or do we need to move on and come back later?
He is not currently on, so we can move on and just move that agenda item down.
Okay. Perhaps if someone who is in the know notices when he logs on, if they'd let us know, and then we can bring him up. With that, we'll go ahead and move on to the staff report section of the agenda. We're going to get our licensing division briefing from Laura Hernandez.
Good morning, board members. My name is Laura Hernandez. I'm one of the licensing managers in the licensing division. For the board report today, I submitted the statistics for the air condition contractors, the registered techs, and the certified techs. Also included are for fiscal year 2023 and the first 2 quarters of fiscal year 2024 that were available at the time of this report. Included in this report is emails that have been received for the air conditioning program by the licensing staff. When customers go online to the TDLR website, there's a contact us page, and they can submit their requests. And so for fiscal year 2024, these are the emails that we received for the air conditioning program. And I'm happy to assist with any questions that you may have regarding this report.
This is Dolores Campion. I have many questions, but it'd probably be more of a offline conversation if it's possible. Maybe the board can direct me with it as to how that process works, because I think I got caught up in a vacuum of emails back and forth. I submitted for my master's electrical, and I did it the old-fashioned way, which I submitted it to 920 Colorado via UPS because that was an option. But then it kind of fell into a void of, where is it at? Where could it be? Did they get it? That kind of stuff. But not to prolong the meeting, if it's possible, maybe you can help me on an offline conversation as to how that process works and what those timelines look like. Because the original email I get says I'll get a response in, I don't know, 10 weeks, something like that. I may be exaggerating for effect, and then got caught up in some other ones that says, well, we're behind, and then I got some other ones that says if 4 or 5 weeks. And the reason why I'm asking is that, when applicants like myself or others put in a request to take a test, their livelihoods are in the balance, and sitting around waiting to see if the application is right for any from 4 to 10 weeks could be cause a little anxiety per se.
Yeah.
There's something in place that says, hey, yes, we got it. Hold on, we're behind, we get it, things, staffing, et cetera, but just sitting here kind of waiting for something that may or may not happen. Or do we eliminate the possibility of sending it directly and just go with the online process so they have a reference number? That's it. That's more of a statement than anything else. Apologies.
Definitely, I'm happy to assist you with any of your questions and to explain any of the processing.
Thank you.
Okay, does that conclude your report, Laura?
Yes, it does, if there's no other questions.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to E2, Customer Service Division. And we're going to have a briefing by Patricia Martinez Castellan on the statistics.
Thank you, Jerry. And good morning, advisory board members. I'm Patricia Martinez. I'm the customer service manager, and I'm here to share statistics for fiscal years 2023 and 2024. Our numbers have demonstrated a level of consistency when compared to the preceding year. What stands out is the fluctuation in the volume of contacts, notably peaking during certain months, such as March, May, and June. And similar to previous years, there is a noticeable seasonal variation in customer interactions with higher volumes during those certain months. We do diligently track license status inquiries and collaborate closely with our licensing division to address any applicant requests. But for the most part, that concludes our statistics. Please let me know if anybody has any questions.
This is Dave Yelovic. That's a lot of things, and I congratulate y'all for getting through all those. Is there any reason why you said year after year we peak in like March and August? I would imagine, HVAC, a lot of consumers would be contacting you in the hot months. But it just seems March seems like an off month. August seems to make sense. But is this truly year to year reflective of those as well?
It's pretty much during peak of certain seasons. We do mainly focus on tracking license status inquiries to make sure that these licenses are being processed and there's minimal delay. But typically it's during or after a holiday that we notice a spike in our contacts. And of course, there can always be external factors. But we do take it on a case-to-case basis, and we do work closely with our licensing division to make sure that everything is communicated and processed as quickly as possible.
So maybe it's tied more to hiring seasons, and the spring would make sense because people are hiring for the upcoming summer?
It very much could be.
That would make sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Does that conclude your report, Patricia?
That does conclude my report. Thank you so much.
Thank you. With that, we'll go on and move on to the Enforcement Division.
Mr. Bittner, before we do that, I see Mr. DeAndrea is in the lobby. If you would like to go back to that item, we can.
Okay.
Okay.
For everyone's benefit, we did have a request for a public comment. Anybody that wishes to address the board has to submit an email that is addressed on this document, and that email has to be in well in advance of the meeting, and there are no offices that are open for public comment. The gentleman who requested to provide a comment, Al DeAndrea, he's going to have 3 minutes to give his comment. And the board is not going to be allowed to ask questions or discuss anything that Mr. DeAndrea has to say. And having said that, Mr. DeAndrea, thank you for being here. When you begin speaking, state your name and who you represent. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. And understand that the board members are not allowed to ask any questions or engage in discussion with you about anything that is not specific on our agenda. And you understand those instructions, Mr. DeAndrea?
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you. You have 3 minutes, so please start whenever you're ready.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Jerry. Yeah, good morning. My name is Al DeAndrea, and I'm the owner of McCullough Heating and Air Conditioning based in Austin. We are primarily a residential service and replacement company with about 55 employees. And really my comments are around the shift to A2L slightly flammable refrigerants. And really, I'd like to just share some of the frustration that I'm feeling about the transition to that. And the frustration really arises from just the great number of unknowns. And I've talked with other contractors, and I think the feeling is fairly universal. I think I've tried to dig into it more than others, and just so many questions that remain unanswered. There seems to be a lot of regulatory information that's in flux and transition that's being changed as we move towards A2Ls. And my concerns are you know, they range from how can it be stored, or how can these refrigerants, you know, what are the requirements to be stored? In our case, we have a unconditioned warehouse that doesn't have sprinklers. My understanding is that you have to have a permit from local fire department. There may be requirements for sprinklers, but even around that, there's a lot of questions, and I've heard that that's not the case now. So it just seems to be this moving set of guidelines and requirements. Transportation, I've heard you can only store 1 jug in a service vehicle. I've some of the training I've taken says that the service vehicle has to be continuously ventilated, and that the refrigerant can't be within 10 feet of any other flammable item. And so, you know, I think there's challenges in existing service vehicles around that. But again, I haven't really heard anything definitive, and I've talked to some people in the industry and say, oh, that's not true. I have concerns around the refrigerant jugs for A2Ls have a vent so that if the ambient temperature rises above 125 degrees, those cylinders will start to vent refrigerant, is my understanding. And the refrigerant doesn't have any smell and is heavier than air. So carrying around refrigerant in an enclosed vehicle in a hot Texas environment, it's gonna get to 125 degrees. It's gonna vent into the interior of the vehicle. And so what does that mean for, you know, a technician who's driving that vehicle? You know, the potential for that to displace the oxygen. So, you know, I'm not trying to be alarmist. I'm really just trying to wrap my head around what do we need to do as a business to operate, you know, in a safe manner, safe and successful manner. The other thing is in the home, and that's a big one for me. I've read where refrigerant piping that's inside enclosed unventilated space, like a wall cavity, will have to be replaced. And I've raised that with people, and they always, oh, it's up to the local code officials. And we've been reaching out to the city of Austin what do you plan to do about A2Ls? And you kind of get the deer in the headlights. So I'm probably at my 3 minutes.
Mr. DeAndre, your comments were well taken by the board. I think everyone will take that under advisement. Of course, there's nothing we're going to be able to do with what you've stated here today because it's not part of our agenda, but
Sure.
perhaps it will be in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. DeAndre.
Thank you for listening.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to continue our staff reports. I think we're at item E3 with Miss Cynthia Marple.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, board members. I am Cynthia Marple, a prosecuting attorney with the Enforcement Division, and I will cover some highlights from the Enforcement Division's report. You may notice that we have updated the format for the report from our last meeting. We've reorganized the materials so you can compare one fiscal year to the other more clearly by laying them side by side. And we're using the same number of months to compare the fiscal years, which means for this set of statistics, we have September to January for each fiscal year, so that we're not comparing an entire fiscal year to a portion of a fiscal year. This first section of performance measures on page 1, these are what we report to the legislature, and they're fairly stable from the 2 fiscal years, are very equivalent. In the criminal history review section, we show a very low percentage of licenses denied or revoked based on past criminal history. It is less than 1% for each of the 2 fiscal years. And going now to page 2, I like the pie charts here that show you the sources for the complaint-based cases that we receive. And as you can see, the largest percentage come from consumers. And under the penalties below this, you will see a section of penalties and consumer remedies. And as you can see, we do have a restitution section because we do work to negotiate settlements for restitution because we do feel making complainants whole is an important part of our role in enforcement. And then moving on to page 3, you'll see cases closed without disciplinary action. This is sometimes where our enforcement division really shines. Our goal is not only to collect fines, but also to gain compliance with the laws and the rules for the program. In combination with making complainants whole, we do like to ensure that our respondents come into compliance. So when a licensee is able to take corrective actions, we will often close as informally resolved because our goal is to teach them and get them into compliance. And sometimes they've come into compliance before the attorney reviews the case. For instance, they didn't have a license, they've since been able to get licensed, or they fixed the issues for the complainant. And there are also instances where cases have been investigated, but there was just not enough evidence to support any allegations, or we found no wrongdoing on the part of the respondent. You also see our top allegations of violations at opening. I'm going to show you what is most commonly alleged in complaints coming down the line. And we also have our main violations that result in disciplinary actions lower down. You'll see those. And they're fairly consistent from year to year. Now moving on to page 4, we do have 2 case summaries for your review. And the final section is the complaint prioritization overview. There's more information in your packet, and we've been working on this at the direction of the Sunset Commission. And we have completed the review of all of our ACR cases' most frequent violations to identify and prioritize those that pose the greatest risk of consumer harm or result in injury or could result in potential personal physical injury. So our goal is to focus the limited resources on complaints that have the greatest impact on public health and safety in the most efficient way. And there's more information here in the packet if you're interested in learning more, and we have now implemented that for all our programs. Thank you for your attention and let me know if you have any questions.
This
Yeah,
is
this is
Dolores
good.
Company. I do have a question. I think it's more of a statement as well, but it could be a question. So I'll try to frame it in the correct manner. I noticed that the violations have increased year over year. Is that in true relation with the amount of new license we've issued? Or is just the complaint basis because old licenses fall off, new licenses come on? Is it the increase due to new licenses or complaints on the rise?
I do not know off the top of my head exactly. I can look into that and get back to you. I did feel like, are you talking about the criminal history licensing issues or?
The code, it was the top one on the list. It was the code. Noticed that there was some mechanical integrity or code. I think it was the first one when it went from 115 to 155, right? And so I used to be a compliance manager for a HVAC company, and so behavior sometimes companies will incorporate financial penalties in their normal business practice and doesn't change their behaviors. And so I was just kind of curious, is it to the increase of licenses issued and just not being fully vetted into the system, or it's just our contractors have just decided that we don't have a lot of teeth and so be it. Like a question and a statement. My apologies.
I mean, I'll make a note of it. I'm not sure that we have an answer at this time, but thank you. And I'm happy to see if we can get more information for you.
This is Jerry Bittner. I have one question for you. Are we through fiscal year 24 or is it still ongoing?
It's still ongoing. Our fiscal years go from September through August. So we've had about, well, March, this is about the 6th month, but the statistics, I think, run to the beginning of February. So these would be the first 5 months of fiscal year 2024. So they only pulled the first 5 months of fiscal year 2023. But yeah, fiscal 2024 as of today is about 6 months.
So when I'm looking at the alleged violations under mechanical integrity code issue, and I see for the entirety of fiscal year 2023, we had 115. And I'm comparing that to fiscal year 2024, where we've got 155. Is there more to be logged for fiscal year 2024? In other words, are we seeing an apple and an apple here? Or is fiscal year 2024, is that 155 number going to go up?
It would be, if we were comparing the full fiscal year 2023 to just 5 months of 2024, it would be concerning in my opinion. But here we're comparing 5 months to 5 months.
Okay.
Yes, there are more mechanical integrity code issues. I would need to do some additional research to see if there's an answer for that. It may be because of the hot summer. There may be a bigger spike in complaints because last summer was unusually hot.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have a definitive answer for why we have more during these first 5 months than the first 5 months of 2023. Okay,
so for statistical purposes, we're looking at 5 months of 23 and 5 months of 24.
Yes.
Okay. That was the nature of my question.
Dolores, I would expect that to be, from a root analysis type guy, I'd expect that to be kind of flat. It seems like to be anyway. Please, if you could dig into it for our next meeting, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. We'll take a note and get back to you. Thank you.
And Cynthia, this is James Graves. I've got just a quick question. Where does the money go that is collected, the penalties collected?
I believe our penalties, I'm sorry.
I just was wondering where it went.
I believe our penalties collected go to the general fund for the state of Texas.
How much money does the general fund have in it now? If we collected 467,000 in 23 and another 461,000 in 24, it's a lot of money.
Mr. Graves, this is Brian Francis.
Yes,
the
sir.
general fund last legislative session had a surplus of $32.9 billion. So
holy moly.
Yeah, so this is a drop. This is the drop in the fund.
I got it. It's that general fund. Okay.
Yes, sir. It's the general fund. So, very quick lesson. All of our revenue goes to the general fund, and then they appropriate back to us a specific amount. So.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Good to know. I understand. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions for Ms. Marple? All
This is
right,
Dolores. Thank you so much.
okay.
Thank you. My presentation is done. Thank you.
All righty. With that, we'll move on to E4, Education and Examination Division. I will call on Mr. Schildwalker, the program specialist, for his briefing.
Good morning, Chairman and board members. My name is John Schildwachter, and it's my pleasure to report our statistics from the Education and Examination Division. Before you today, first up, we have the overall exam statistics for the current fiscal year and last fiscal year 2023. As you can see, those pass rates have stayed pretty static, as you can see, as you compare month to month and then quarter to quarter. We do have stats through the second quarter of the current fiscal year 2024. And just a quick comparison to that to the previous fiscal year, you can see we've stayed real consistent on that. On the next slide, I believe in the past advisory board, it was asked to review or to get some information on first-time pass rates. And you can see there we have the current pass rates for each of those four for this current fiscal year 2024. They have also looked somewhat comparable to the stats on the previous slide. But anyway, that information is now provided for you. The next slide, please. This is just a breakdown further of pass rates amongst the different license types, and then an easy side-by-side comparison between the fiscal years 2024 and 2023. And you can see once again, those statistics stay fairly consistent between the two fiscal years. If you see a significant drop or change, usually that has to do with the number of test takers. When your numbers get low, sometimes it can throw off that pass rate to be not necessarily in line, but you can see that generally they're straightforward and consistent. Move on to the next slide, please. And this is the statistics for the continuing education course approvals. And again, illustrating 2024 and 2023. You can see those numbers there before you. And I believe that's my last slide, which concludes my presentation. And I'm available and I will do my best to answer any questions you may have.
Hi, John. Dave Yelovic. Thank you for these numbers. I know in a little bit we're going to be talking about education a little more in depth, but as a trainer and educator, looking at those pass rates, if we were a school district, the state would take over. Pass rates of 25%, pass rates of 31%. Either the tests are too hard or the education is too little. Could you give us maybe some overall background? What are your thoughts? I know you say year after year, the numbers stay the same, but we need to get people licensed and educated, or educated and then licensed. What needs to happen to get those numbers up to something that we could be proud of and say, hey, we got the best trained people in the industry in Texas. Right now, those numbers are horrible, in my opinion.
Right. And I can certainly understand where you might say that. There is a group called the Exam Review Committee that meets with our vendor on a regular basis. And I'm not familiar with all of the SMEs that attend that, but I believe there may be one or two of the board members that attend those. And so they work through all the exam questions, they review them, they ensure that there's a real basis to each of those questions, and the committee basically decides that what a licensee needs to be minimally qualified to operate with that license. Certainly, there can be discussions in the future, but it's not so much focused on pass rates as it is what does a licensee need to know to be minimally qualified to hold that license. I can provide more background, but I'd have to reach out to some of my staff we have in our division that actually works in the exam review committee. But generally, that's the
Yeah,
goal
I
behind that.
appreciate that. It's just, and I'm familiar with the testing and how we go through all that, and I have confidence in that. So I would turn it around and say, hey, we're missing something in the education field, because if you have our tests, and they're pretty, they've been there around forever, kind of like STAR testing in the schools, you're going to kind of educate people, say, hey, here's what you're going to see on the test. And we get them to this level, but these, 20 and 30% passing rate is just, something's wrong.
Yeah.
Dave, I can help a little bit. John, I can
Yeah,
help you a little bit. Okay. Well, for one thing, air conditioning, we don't train the contractors. Okay. They have to come up with that themselves. And in air conditioning, we don't have the levels of responsibility like apprentice, journeyman, master. We have one contractor, okay, air conditioning contractor. He is responsible for the training and the hiring. Okay. Now, basically, we have registered technicians. If I'm a contractor, I can hire an 18-year-old registered technician. He has a criminal background check that passes. He pays his money. I can send him out on a 2,400 ton centrifugal chiller if I want to. That's not right. Okay. So it's up to them to train. And in enforcement, that's where we try to bring them back in. Now, to get to the core of the situation, that's what the new education is about. Taking the age down to 16 and then putting that into the high schools, and that's the education that's going to bring our industry up. So we're dealing with what we have. And I can tell you that I sit on those exam committees, and every single question that's on that exam is somewhere in a paragraph in either our technical book or the code book, and it's an open book test. So because we don't train them, we shouldn't be, I guess, looked at as we're failing them. It's up to them. It's up to the contractors. It's up to the licensees, folks, to police themselves that way. That's just the way it is, Dave. But very good question. I mean, that's not understood by everybody.
Let me,
That's
Dolores,
as best
let me
as I
add a
can
little color
explain.
to that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you, Mr. Weatherly.
No, go ahead.
I'm currently working on taking my Florida exam. And this is only half the books that I need to study. I don't know if you can see them or not. Passed that 120 PSI exam. I can't even carry it into the office, right? But what I'm referring to is this. As Mr. Weatherly has said, it's up to the individual to want to study and take. So I think there's a graph that can be easily shown in the testing that can simplify that question. I think I've asked it in the past. Excuse me, I'm straining a little bit. But my question was, and I don't know whether we can track repeat test takers. I don't think we have that capability where he takes the test, right? He doesn't pass it, so he waits the minimal time, takes it again, and then takes it again, and that may skew the numbers, right, from the percentages. But if we have test takers who are not investing in the hours, right, to do the work, to pass the test the first time, and then just, we have a lot of companies out there and all they do is program themselves to sell them a one-day crash course and they go hope for the best, right? Well, we have others who invest the time and do the studying and the reading and the highlighting and they pass. So if there's a way to go, hey, this individual, we're not looking for specific names, we're just looking for something to say, hey, this individual's taken it 3 times and he passed on the 4th time. That will kind of enlighten and maybe shed some light as to what the question could possibly be.
I can tell you, this is Jerry Bittner. My experience with respect to the pass-fail has shown me that, first off, everyone, I think, like Bill Weatherly explained, needs to understand that the people who are taking these tests are the people who kind of aspire to start their own business, because you don't need a license just to work in the industry. Secondly, the word on the street is that these tests are pretty easy to pass if you kind of just study the code book, kind of do this or kind of do that. And there's a couple of test prep courses out there, if you will, you know, that are written. And of course, there's test prep courses that are very thorough that you take with an instructor. My experience is that the people who are failing, and you can look at the statistics, bear it out, are the lower skilled of the two endeavors. When you look at the pass rate for commercial refrigeration, A and B, you're in the upper 60s. Those people have spent a lot of time and effort, like Mr. Compion has just illustrated, educating themselves in the technical aspects of the trade. The people who are failing are the people who want to work on small stuff, residential, the air conditioning B, some of the air conditioning A. I think they just take it because they would rather have the higher certification, but they're not. My experience has shown me that these people are not studying, and that's why the failure rate is so high.
You know, another thing, they should be getting the experience under their licensed contractor that they're working for, because it's one of the requirements is 4 years under a licensed contractor. You know, so that's set there. They should be learning something there. So is there a disconnect? Probably.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
you know,
I can tell you, the people that want to pass are passing. The people who are taking this thing on kind of a wing and a prayer, they're the ones that aren't passing, and the statistics are bearing that out.
Well, I will say I am encouraged by what's on our agenda a little later that will help us bring more people into the system. And I do believe teaching this in high school and earlier in their life, that they will come to understand that, hey, this is just the starting point. I need to always be learning. Just because you take one step, you always got to keep learning. And yes, they will aspire to those higher levels later, but they got to start off with this. And looking at some of these things that we have on the agenda is very encouraging. And I would hope that, 3-4 years down the road, we would see some of those entry level guys passing at much higher rates. And that's my hope.
I have
This
one
is
more
Dolores.
thing for you, Dave. In the exam review, we do look at every question. And when I say every question, if there's a question that is only passed the first time by 10%, then we change that question. That's too hard. The question is too hard. So we do look at that. And if there's one that everyone passes, maybe that's not quite hard enough. So we try to, to balance it a little bit there. So,
Mr. Chairman, this is Brian Francis. Ms. Yelovic, thank you so much. Obviously, your comments have really stimulated a lot of discussion that needs to happen. I had similar feelings when I first started here. That exam pass rate's entirely too low. But as I started understanding how that exam is developed with what's the minimum competency that's necessary to perform that task, I started doing what you did, which is I'm now looking at the individual and saying, okay, are they preparing properly for this examination? And I'm leaning now more towards what Mr. Compion talked about. We do have folks that are going there cavalierly, sitting for the examination, believing they can just pass it without looking at the information. When you go to our webpage, you see the candidate information brochure. It breaks down every examination, the type of questions, the number of questions that are in that respective area. Obviously, it lists the reference materials, and they are pretty substantial, as Mr. Compion just got his workout in for the week, lifting those books. But it's a combination, but I think it's skewed more towards the candidate not preparing as properly. I've sat through several exam development sessions, whether for this industry or other industries, and I've seen the diligence of the individuals in there, like Mr. Wedley said, looking at every question in every STEM and making sure that it's not a trick question, that we're not trying to make the person guess. We want to test their knowledge. And when you do that, it gives me a lot more confidence that our examination is the threshold. A threshold for, are we going to let this person touch our consumers, our Texans? And I think there is something that we can do to maybe emphasize more on the pass rate. There was a question earlier, I think it was from Mr. Bittner. I can't remember who, and I apologize. But we do have the ability to identify, I know it's Mr. Compion, we have the ability to identify the first time pass rate. So we, that's one that you want to look at. And then we have the ability to identify, the folks that have taken it multiple times. So that is something that I'll work with, and I'll talk to Ray and his team and Mr. Shieldwalker. Great job on your presentation, by the way, to present to this board the overall pass rate, but also the first time pass rate. So they'll share that with you as well. Okay.
All right. With that, we'll go ahead and move on to item E5, Compliance Division, and we're going to have Mr. Bill Weatherly give us his brief.
Well, good morning, board members, staff, and everyone watching on our YouTube channel. My name is Bill Weatherly. I'm the Chief Inspector for Air Conditioning and Refrigeration, and I'm going to give the Compliance Division staff report. I'm going to start out with our current highlights and activities. After our last board meeting, just a little bit after that in October, we had an exam review. For that exam review, we were realigning the ACR questions to the new 2022 edition of Modern Refrigeration and Air Conditioning. That's our technical source for the exam. And then we also have an upcoming exam review, and that's April 30th through May the 2nd here. And that's when we work with PSI and all our subject matter experts to review the exam again. And this time we're looking at the 2021 ICC codes, as you'll see in my next bullet down here, that as far as the state goes, TDLR, we're moving to adopting the 2021 international codes. And we have to update the exams to reflect that. And then effective this year, September 1st, 2024, we plan to adopt the following applicable codes as referenced in the Administrative Code, Chapter 75, 71.110. And we're going to the 2021 International Residential Code, the International Mechanical Code, International Fuel Gas Code, and then the Uniform Mechanical Code. And as you can see, it's not the 2024 codes are out, but we try to give the industry a little time to prepare. So we stay one code cycle behind. That's what we try to do. Then moving on, November 14th of this last year, myself and my deputy, Troy Smart, attended the Post-Disaster Rapid Safety Evaluation and Damage Assessment. That's a mouthful. Training was provided by BPI, which is the Building Professional Institute, and by BOAT, which is the Building Official Association of Texas. And the Post-Disaster Rapid Response Team administered by BOAT maintains a list of volunteers to respond to major disasters, including tornadoes, hurricanes, fires, and floods. And so my deputy and myself, we were signed up if they need us, and this is second responder type things. And we help the team to evaluate damage, that kind of thing, if they do need us. So. Then enforcement review and inspections. This one of our main jobs that we do, Troy Smart and myself. To date, for fiscal year 2024, we've completed 15 formal enforcement case reviews to ensure mechanical integrity for compliance with ACR law, rules, and code requirements. This includes 2 on-site inspections that we did in Feline and Kyle. And sometimes we cannot do those just by taking our reports from our investigators and through pictures, some that are a little bit more technical and that may have some safety issues with them. So we'll do an on-site investigation then. And then something ACR exam applications, and this is important to move those applications that we get due to a new team in the licensing division assigned to ACR. Chief Weatherly, myself, has been assisting the team in qualifying applicants for the ACR Contractors exam. So since September of 2023, I have reviewed 8 to 10 applicants per week, and a lot of those are out of state. We need to look and see if they are equivalent to Texas requirements. And a lot of them are just a little more technical, so I've been helping them. And I did conduct a virtual meeting with the licensing team to give an overview and answer questions that way. So. And then moving forward, coincidentally, I want to talk about A2L refrigerants. That's what our speaker talked about, Mr. DeAndrea. And this is very important. And I have questions myself. I've been researching this. This is coming, and I don't think a lot of folks in the industry are going to realize this till it hits them like a ton of bricks. But we are going to a new refrigerant, period, full stop. I mean, it's happening. And I think HVACR technicians find themselves at the forefront of this refrigerant transition. What we're going away from are HFCs, or refrigerants that have a high global warming potential, and that is the 410A, is what is in most residential air conditioners now. Back in the early 90s, we started the transition from R22, which is HCFC. We're going to, because it had an ozone depletion. Okay, and so now we're not focused on ozone depletion. We've taken care of that. We're looking at global warming, and that's federally. And it's basically the Environmental Protection Agency oversees that. And the approved refrigerants now are commonly known as R454B and R32, and those do have an A2L classification, which means they have a low flammability, quote unquote. Okay, and if you're an HVACR technician, it's likely you will soon encounter these. It's important to gain better understanding. And just to go into this a little bit, and I'm going to try to move on pretty quick. A2Ls are considered mildly flammable and consist of hydrofluorochlorophens, HFOs, and they're usually a blend of two synthetic refrigerants. The ones in the A2L category have a component of propane, which is R290, and that's what gives them the flammability. But what they're saying is they should be self-extinguishing. Okay, in other words, they have to have a flame on them all the time if they're in lower concentrations. We'll see. And it's natural to have concerns about this. Let's talk about the lower flammability. A2Ls are 8 times higher than propane as far as the flammability limit. In other words, it's 8 times harder for them to ignite than it is for propane. All right. Minimum ignition, the R290, which is propane, is a very low minimum ignition energy, and it's more likely to be ignited. And so they're telling us they're safe. We have to educate the folks about this, but heated combustion also is supposed to be a lower for the A2Ls, but there's a potential here. If there wasn't a potential, we wouldn't have the rules that are coming down the pike. So I'm going to paraphrase a little bit as I go through because of our time, but it looks like that we may have to have leak sensors on the equipment that are coming out. It's going to be very important that we keep the concentration down. As Mr. DeAndrea said, there's some reports that any refrigerant lines have to be in their own separate chase, okay, coming through. It may be, from what I've looked at, it may be on multi-story, 3 stories and above, but you can see an apartment complex that may have 30 or 40 or more refrigerant split systems for these compartments. Each one of those will have to have a separate chase or separate compartment for the refrigerant lines to go through, is what I have learned when I'm looking into this. And they're not drop-in replacements at all. Then going down to the cylinders, Mr. DeAndrea talked about a pressure relief valve in R410A and 22. Now there's a rupture disc, so if it gets to the R125, then the entire bottle comes out, with the rupture disc. Now they're going to have a valve on it, so if it gets to the 125, it'll just let a little bit out, until it comes down to the pressure. But as he said, if it's in an enclosed van, these don't have an odorant attached to them. What's the safety factor there? We don't know. So I'm not telling you a lot, but I want to make us aware that we need to dig into this a little bit more. The cylinders will be changed. They'll have a red band or a stripe. They'll also have left-handed threads, so that means the service technician will have to have a separate set of gauges. And I'm just thinking, if I was a service technician after these rules come into effect next January, I might have to have 3 to 4 different refrigerants in my van, 3 or 4 different refrigerant gauges, different vacuum pumps for each one, and different, protocols for those refrigerants. And then I've heard that the new safety labels were going to appear on the equipment, and they also may have a locking cover over the service valves for that. So, just like Mr. DeAndrea said, I don't want to be an alarmist in any of this, but I think this is a good topic for the advisory board to dig into, because it's going to affect a lot of folks down the line. And I read through that pretty fast, but I will certainly answer any questions that as I can, that you might have.
Bill, I do have another comment too. The pressures that these new refrigerants operate at are a lot higher than the 410, and certainly a lot higher than R22. So if you've had problems with condenser leaks before, I think you're going to have a whole lot more now.
Yeah, it depends on which one, R32 or 454B, but you're correct. It's all changing, and the pressure temperature chart, you can look at those and you can see the difference. So yeah, leak checking is going to be very important on this, and there are going to be sensors on the new equipment that's going to tell you if you have leaks. They're going to be proactive sensors, not reactive, like we have now. So, Mr. Hughes, good point.
Bill, Dave here again.
Yes, sir, Dave.
Just connecting some dots here. We just said that you said we're going to go to the 21 codes.
Mhm.
Does the 21 codes have any qualms about putting semi-flammable gases into these systems?
No, they do not. But this is going to be decided on a statewide basis and at each municipality as well. And the 2024 code is where it allows this. If you look at the International Mechanical Code 2024, that's where they talk about allowing the A2Ls.
So if we adopt the 21, is someone in compliance if they put this into the system?
These are federal laws, and we're breaking new ground, Dave.
I just don't want us to have TDLR make an emergency proclamation down the road when we discover that things have gone awry.
Yeah, I think it's going to be up to us to get in front of this.
Well, I'm just going to recommend, hi, this is Doug Jennings, General Counsel. I'm going to recommend that we put this item on the agenda for our next meeting. I am talking with in the background with some folks, and we'll make sure to get with Bill to make sure we are looking at the right guidance, and then we'll bring some information to you, and probably ask you to form a work group, something like that, so we can take a closer look. Like Bill said, we know a lot of this is going to be governed by federal law, but it raises very almost existential questions for air conditioning businesses, especially when you take into considerations some of the things our public commenter mentioned about service vehicles. And so I just want to make sure that, and I know it's a point of interest to you, that we keep this ball rolling. So we will be happy to do that. Thanks.
Yeah, this is Dolores. Kind of segue into what I was going to mention is do you feel, Mr. Weatherly and himself, Doug, are ACA contractors looking for regulation, or they're looking for guidance? I think it's a little bit of both, right? And obviously, we always caution the regulation part, and it's because then there's some accountability there. But I look forward to being on that work group if they need anybody. So it'd be interesting at best. Thank you.
Well, it's going to cost a lot of money, so they're looking at how to plan.
This is Jerry Bittner. I predict for the citizens of Texas, this is going to become painful. It's the people who are in charge of this this isn't promulgated by the government in the sense that it's the manufacturers, so the individual manufacturers of the equipment who decide what refrigerant goes into their products. And as Bill stated and as Mr. DeAndrea stated, there's a lot of additional equipment that's going to be required for this. And when you compare this, obviously very complex set of situations to the pass-fail rate that you're seeing, I don't know that anybody can expect anything but a significant increase in the number of consumer complaints that you're going to be seeing once this equipment starts to get installed.
Yes, Bill Weatherly again. Yeah, the price of air conditioning is going to go up all the way around. And the government has decided that these refrigerants have to have a number of 700 and below global warming potential, and none of the current refrigerants have that. They're way above that. So, but I can tell you one thing, that there are going to be two. Daikin, who's the world's largest air conditioning provider of equipment, and they have the patent on R32, and R32 is one of them that's an A2L. And then Carrier has decided to go with 454B and 454A. So we know of 3 refrigerants that are coming down the pike there that do meet this threshold of 700 for the global warming potential. So, but Mr. Bittner, you know, you're exactly right. Price of air conditioning is going.
And we're
Again, just wanted to jump in real quick. Doug Jennings, General Counsel. We've, you know, we've been talking about this a good deal, and I think we've got enough info to make sure we put it on the agenda for a future meeting. But since it was an item that was kind of in a report and it wasn't, you know, identified specifically on the agenda, I would have more comfort if we kind of moved on to the next thing with the understanding that we're going to continue this discussion. If that is acceptable.
I think so.
All right.
The horse is writhing on the ground. With that, we'll move on to item E6, the executive office update brief, and we're going to call on Mr. Brian Francis for that brief.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, this is Brian Francis, Interim Executive Director for TDLR. I'm excited to be here. So the first part of my presentation is just dealing with the bill implementation. You've got that on your agenda in terms of the rules, and I think Mr. Yelovic had referred to that as well in regard to getting the ACR program into the high school. So I'm super excited. So that'll be addressed during the rule covering part of it. The other part is the strategic planning process. Several of you have been involved with this over the years on this. TDLR takes it extremely seriously. We believe that the answers are out there, that we don't have all the answers. And so our process, we're in that information gathering phase to where we're reaching out to our licensees and asking them, what do we do well? What can we do better? If you were king or queen for a day, what's one change you would make in a rule, a statute, a process that TDLR puts forward? And then, you know, the crystal ball provision. What do you think is going to happen over the next 5 years? We're already hearing some of it now, but what do you think is going to happen over the next 5 years that's going to impact the industry, that will impact the way that we have to regulate? And so we're in that process this last week, or actually this week on Monday, we were in Houston and El Paso. This coming Monday will be in Harlingen and Arlington. And then on April 15th, we will be in Austin, which will also be streamed, so there could be even greater participation in that conversation. We've also placed those same 4 questions on our social media platforms, and I'm looking at a lot of y'all. Looks like you guys are on them all day long. Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, but we're out there trying to reach everybody. And so the same questions are being asked of our licensees, but also being asked of our employees. This is an exciting time to make sure that we're still continuing to fine tune and refine the way that we do business and recognize, again, like I said before, that the answers are out there. But I'm excited to be back. I've got a few more months on the payroll, so I'm going to make the most of the days that I have with this staff and with the agency. So if you have any questions, I'm available to answer.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Francis? Okay. Sounds like no questions for him. With that, we'll go on and move to agenda item F. I'm not going to read the entirety of this paragraph, but suffice it to say, this discussion is going to center around the adoption of the new codes. A lot of these have been already mentioned here earlier in this meeting. And so I'm going to turn this discussion over to Mr. Doug Jennings, our General Counsel.
Thank you, Mr. Bittner, and thank you, board members and staff for being here today. Really appreciate your time. We have a rule coming up. I'm going to go ahead and share it on my screen, but I'm going to ask Laura Pefferly, one of our Assistant General Counsel attorneys, to discuss the rule and present it to you. Laura has been with our division for a little over 8 years now, and since 2015, as a matter of fact, has been our go-to person on a number of programs. Is one of the attorneys in our office that we rely really heavily upon because of her attention to detail and her excellent drafting and communication. And as I think you're aware, I think we mentioned this at the last meeting, I've moved to the position of General Counsel for the agency, and I'll be transitioning out of my role as program attorney for this board. That's not something I'm thrilled about doing because I love working with you all, but I wanted to make sure that you were in the best hands possible. And I think you will grow to love Laura and just like we do, and see her great work product. So with that, I'm going to share my screen for the code rule and pass it over to Laura.
Okay. Thank you, Doug, for that great intro. I hope I can live up to that. The rules I'm covering are just the adoption of the new codes. Right now we're under the 2018 codes, and we're just updating to adopt the 2021 versions of the codes, and this is the International Residential Code, International Mechanical Code, International Fuel Gas Code, and the Uniform Mechanical Code. And this is required by statute for us to do this. The current codes are going to be in effect until August 31st, and then the new code will apply starting September 1st. So any work permitted or started before September 1st can be done under the 2018 version, and then it'll be a matter of converting over to the 2021 version. And as you know, the municipalities will adopt these codes as well and enforce them, but for us, this is a statutory requirement, and that's really all this rule is about, is just the new codes. And so we're recommending that you agree to recommend it for proposal to go to the public comment period. And so with that, you can make your vote on that, the recommendation to propose. Thank you.
Doug Jennings, General Counsel. Yes, so board members, we're looking for your authorization to publish these rules to start the formal rulemaking process. So we will open it up for public comment. Those comments we will bring back to you at your next meeting, and we'll talk about the scheduling of that in just a bit. But that way we can go ahead and get the comments, round them up, analyze them, and bring them back to you for your next meeting, at which point we hope you will consider those comments and recommend adoption to our commission. So this is step one.
Okay. Do we need to ask for a motion in a second to move forward with this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I would like to ask for a motion to move forward with this for the next meeting.
This is Dolores.
David Morris here. I would like to second that.
Can I have a second, please?
Yes, David Morris, I'd like to second that.
Was that Mr. Campion that made the motion initially? Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't know that we need a roll call vote, do we?
I can do one if you'd like, sir, since we're sharing. We can't see everybody's hands.
Not unless Doug thinks it's necessary.
We could do a show of hands. That would be fine.
Okay.
on camera. All in favor say aye or raise your hand, please. Oh, that's not a hand from Ryan. All right, all opposed? All right, appears to, we had four ayes and one abstention, it appears. Mr. Yolovic, did you intend to abstain?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. Thank you. Okay.
All right. With that, we'll go ahead and move on to the next agenda item, which is item G. This is a little more in depth than the code issues. This has to do with discussion and possible recommendation to the amendments to the Code Chapter 75 regarding technician certification and not continuing education, but education as a pathway into the career and technical education programs offered by high schools. There have been work group meetings in the past, I think 3 of them, if I recall, maybe 4. And to get into the details of this, I'm going to go ahead and turn this discussion over to Mr. Doug Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Bittner. Again, thank you, board members. Doug Jennings, General Counsel. Today is a big day. I'm really excited to be able to bring these rules to you. Just going to give you a little background before we start going through the actual rule text. You know, I expect this to be a pretty robust discussion. Happy to, you know, see where it takes us. Just to give you a little bit of background, House Bill 1859, which passed during the last legislature, does a few different things. I think the primary thing it does, and I think we're all aware of, is it requires TDLR, requires our department and our commission to adopt rules that set out what are called the essential knowledge and skills that a student should be able to acquire in a high school setting over a series of courses in order to become eligible for the certified technician. I think we call it the technician certification, but shorthand is a certified technician license. And so it also provides that you know, we identify these essential skills and knowledge so that public schools can implement these programs. They're called CTE, career and technology education. They're called CTE programs. But the bill, House Bill 1859, also recognizes that private high schools are going to want to offer these courses. Institutions of higher education, so colleges, universities, may want to offer this course of education, and so imposes a guideline that college courses or private high school courses may not be more stringent than a public high school course. So what we did, rather than reinvent the wheel, we got the work group together, and I'd like to thank, by the way, Mr. Bittner, Mr. Graves, and Mr. Compion for being part of our work group. We met, I think we had 3 or 4 different meetings. I agree. There was a lot going on. We also had help from representatives from Texas State Technical College, which we were required by the bill to consult with TSTC. We also had some great assistance from Alexis Bowserman and Marcette Kilgore from the Texas Education Agency. Very helpful as well. Helped us kind of translate these what we were talking about into how it would actually work in the schools. What the work group identified is that TEA, Texas Education Agency, has already I'm going to refer to TEA. The body that actually adopts their rules is the State Board of Education, but let's just say TEA. There are rules under TEA that have already created programs of study under their construction program. They have created a focused program of study called HVAC and sheet metal. And what their governing board has done is kind of like what we have been doing. Previously, they assembled a large group of professionals in the field, air conditioning and refrigeration field, to get together and identify, what knowledge a student would need to acquire in a high school setting in order to come out of high school and work in the field. And so they have put together some very detailed documents, which they're not curricula, so that what they don't do is state a student must, spend 80 hours with, learning to cut ferrous piping. They don't say that. What they do lay out is all of the topics and skills, and the individual schools implementing those programs can decide based on that where to allocate those hours of education. And so there's an existing series of courses in the TEA system that starts with a prerequisite. A student, in some rare instances, may take this course in as early as junior high, but mostly ninth grade. And it's called Principles of Construction. And it's just a foundational course where a student learns things about job site behavior and safety, basic mathematical calculations, basic reading of plans, electrical and job safety in particular, electrical safety in particular, those kinds of foundational items. And a student typically gets one academic credit of that, and that's if you think about things in a semester setting, that's typically going to be 2 semesters. Schools are free, of course, to design their courses as they see fit, maybe make it a 2-hour course for 1 semester, that kind of thing. The next course in the series is HVAC. I'm just going to say that because it's word salad. HVAC Technology 1. And that is a kind of the first deep dive into air conditioning and refrigeration technology that is not simply foundational. It builds upon that prerequisite. And the students start getting that hands-on experience, and they start really focusing on skills that they would perform on the job as a certified technician. And that, once again, is 1 academic credit. The more advanced course would be next, and that is HVAC Technology 2, and that's a 2-credit course, much more in depth, building upon the foundational knowledge that they got in Principles of Construction and the more advanced knowledge they've acquired in HVAC Technology 1. So HVAC Technology 2 is actually like I mentioned, is 2 credits. So not only are you being more specific and more engaged in those tasks and looking at more advanced topics, you're also spending more time in that course. And then the last option is something called a practicum. That's called a practicum in construction technology. And what that involves is a student during the academic day going and working. In this instance, it would be for a air conditioning contractor for, say, 2 hours a day over the course of a year, would earn that student 2 credits. They could also arrange it so the student works 4 hours a day for a semester. And so that would be part of that. And the reason we included that practicum portion, it's already part of what TEA sees as the proper sequencing of these courses, but it's also it was very important to everyone in the work group that the students who are engaged in these programs aren't simply in the classroom, even if they're getting a lot of hands-on instruction in the classroom, that they are performing work outside the classroom, and that it's not simply, we use examples of, being a gopher, right? You're actually working under a contractor doing tasks that a technician would do. And so because those TEA courses existed, we did not have to reinvent the wheel. And the work group spent a lot of time looking at these courses and identifying and determining whether they provided adequate instruction, whether there were topics that should be included that were not. One of the, for example, in the HVAC Technology 2 course, the work group saw that there was a focus on fiberglass and metal ductwork, and decided, this should be optional. This should not be mandatory, because we're talking about a certified technician who is likely not going to be engaged in that particular task. Keep in mind that we are, when we and our rules, and I'll walk you through the rules in a minute. Essentially, our rules identify these 4 courses as containing references to the essential knowledge and skills that a student will need to have to come out and work as a certified technician. Keep in mind, a student who completes these courses may become eligible for that license, but they would still have to take an exam. So we're not talking about completing the courses, going straight to licensure. We're talking about taking the courses, passing the exam, and then becoming I say license, understand I mean a technician certification. And so there were some, that was the primary task of the work group, was to identify those courses, that knowledge. And then moving from there, it was our job to put them together in a rules format and to figure out some of the mechanics. One of the interesting things about House Bill 1859 is that it does, it anticipates that that all the courses will be finished in high school. And so, it does constrain us somewhat. And so one of the big considerations we had to make as a group was that practicum credit that I mentioned, where a student is leaving school for the day and working under a contractor. What is an acceptable level of that experience that we can also reasonably expect the average student, who wants to pursue this, to be able to complete, during 4 years of high school. And in speaking with, actually just this morning, I was on a call with some representatives from TEA, and they were explaining to me that the typical student must have, I think, 28 academic credits to graduate high school, and 22 of those are already spoken for by mandatory courses. And so there is, there's a little bit to work with in terms of courses that a student isn't required to take, but that they might want to take in this field. And so we're not dealing with, potentially 10 courses that they could take 10 credits, right? We're talking about a smaller number. But a student, we're trying to keep in mind the average student who might have, other courses. But if you're taking band and football and doing all of your, mandatory courses, you're probably going to struggle to find time to complete a practicum. That's noted. So we just wanted to strike that right balance. I think another interesting complication is that schools have been moving away from, I think we've all become familiar with the, in Texas, the 180-day school schedule. That's actually changed recently due to some statutory amendments, and schools are modifying their schedules now. I think you've probably seen some articles about some schools moving to a lengthier school day, but only doing it 4 days a week, doing some hybrid in-person and distance education. And so not only are we trying to identify these essential skills and knowledge, but folding them into this landscape that has changed, where where when I say 1 credit, that doesn't mean, a person is going to be in a seat X number of hours. One of the other considerations that we had in the work group is that for these courses like HVAC Technology 1 and 2, what is the appropriate breakdown between lecture and hands-on instruction? There is no question that there's theory, right? We know this. Both on the HVAC side and on the electrical side, there's theory. There are things you need to know about pressures and temperatures, and you've got to learn those. You've got to learn those first. Well, maybe not necessarily first, but you've got to learn them, right? And then you will have to learn how they work in practice. We had several educators in the meeting, and altogether, I think we came to essentially a group decision that we've put in these rules, that most of that instruction in those higher level courses needs to be practical and hands-on in a lab type environment. We don't believe, based on the landscape, that any schools would just be, any of our current schools that would be just giving their kids lecture, giving their students lecture, because all the educators agreed that no, they need that hands-on experience. But we provided that guideline for schools who don't already have a program who would like to establish one, just to give them some very clear guidance on how to structure their programs. Having spoken to a few educators, I won't name any names, the ones I've spoken to have been very comfortable with this figure, and it matches what they are currently doing. I see a hand, Mr. Campion.
I wanted to add a little color to that. I have a nephew and two great nephews who ventured off into that program. You know, they already finished high school and whatnot, and so I sponsored them with tools and to get into a program, college type level. And you know, I've been following up with them, and two of them, the younger two, have already dropped the program and just basically gave up the tuition. And when I asked him, bravely disappointed, but when I asked him, he goes, all we did was log in online, to give us a few lectures, and then we kind of left to go do whatever we needed to do on our own. And so I think it's very important that the practicum takes in place, especially at the high school level. So I'm glad that we added that. I wanted to reemphasize that it takes a lot of discipline, a lot of, you know, a lot of discipline routines to get our youth to get to where they may need to be, and it may not be for everybody, obviously, but and I'm sure there's other mitigating circumstances, life and all these other things, but I think it's a great place to start. And so, you know, once life takes over and you start developing roots in your family, you know, priorities take place. So great place to start at the high school level. Just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Mr. Campion. I appreciate that. And kind of building along one of the things you just mentioned, you know, one of the challenges was making sure, I think I mentioned this already, is making sure that a student can reasonably complete this program of instruction within the 4 years of high school. And one other thing that we did, when the work group got together, I think there was a kind of an open question whether 2 or 3 credits of the practicum would be appropriate. And in keeping with what I've heard from TEA and the concern that I've heard from board members, when we drafted the rules, I decided to impose 3 credits of practicum rather than 2. We are certainly we can certainly roll that back. One of the things we coupled with that, however, House Bill 1859 requires us to implement rules requiring a school to give a student academic credit for that the practicum portion, for work that they perform outside of school. So imagine a student who's very focused on this track, maybe has 2 hours a day where he goes and works for goes and works for a contractor during the day, and he's getting academic credit that way. Doesn't have time to take 3 hours out of his or her schedule to do that. Let's say that student also doesn't have time to, that student is caring for a parent or a sibling after school, but during summers has time to maybe not work full time, but put a substantial number of hours in each week for that contractor. And so our rules are going to provide a mechanism for a school to help that student fulfill those practicum credits by those out of school jobs. So it's not just the work that they're doing under a licensed contractor inside of school hours, but also outside. And that's one of those quality of life changes that we think that's going to be able to help these students get across the finish line if we do in fact require 3 credits of practicum. And I'll talk about this a little bit later. Looking at, we'll need to make some small changes to the language that we'll be reviewing today along the way, just to make some tweaks that we've discovered here in the last couple of weeks. What we've done, and it's not standard for TDLR, but we like to do it on these really high profile rulemaking items that impact a lot of people, is we like to put the rules out for public comment before we start the rulemaking process, before we bring it to you. And that's not only to provide the public an opportunity to give us information, but I think I said this earlier today to somebody, more information is better information, period. And to make sure that we have, at least even in our first draft, that we're taking to you for publication, our final first draft, I'll say it that way, that we have addressed kind of all the outstanding issues. And I'd like to say, what I'm really happy to say is that the comments that we have received over the last couple of weeks regarding this package have been very, very positive. I think something like 10 or 12 so far as of yesterday, and overwhelmingly positive. And so that has been really helpful. A lot of people recognize the need for more qualified people in the workforce in this area. Really happy to mention that. Let me talk real quick about a few other things that House Bill 1859 did. One is pretty significant, and you heard Bill mention it earlier, Mr. Weatherly. It moved the minimum age for a registered technician to 16 instead of 18. However, that comes with a condition that person be under that any minor be given what's called direct supervision in the bill. That term direct supervision is already used in our rules to mean something else. But we know when we read the statute, direct supervision, the plain reading of that bill tells us, there's a greater level of supervision for those minors. And so we've implemented that in our rules, that a licensee must provide in-person supervision of a minor, either the contractor, him or herself, or through the services of a certified technician that is that they hire, or that works for that company. A couple of other, once again, I mentioned quality of life changes. One of the interesting things is that instructors of these educational programs not only will get continuing education for that work, but also will be able to renew their licenses for free. And so that's a nice little perk. I think the authors, I think Representative Schaefer recognized that we need to give incentives to instructors because schools may struggle. Schools in some areas may struggle to find a contractor to instruct a program. So anything that the law could do to provide some sort of incentive was appreciated. We're about to jump into the rules. I'm going to put them on my screen, but first I want to ask, does anybody have any questions about what I've just summarized? The last thing I want to say is, so House Bill 1859 also, I mentioned that we are adopting the essential skills and knowledge that, a public school is great because these courses have already been recognized by TEA. They can just say, okay, great, we're offering principles of construction. What is a little different is that a college or a private high school probably doesn't have a course already called Principles of Construction. But you know what? Based on what we're doing here today, they can look at what we have described as Principles of Construction and they can make their own course as long as it adheres to those, as long as it includes those essential skills and knowledge. So we're not just providing guidance to public schools, we're providing guidance to any school that is implementing a similar program or wants to create one. And so there's a rule at the end of what we're looking at today that just that figures out the mechanics of how that will work. There was Mr. Compion asked a question today earlier about licensing times, and there's a process we've adopted in these rules that I think is going to help with that, where a school that is not a public high school, but either a private high school or a college that wants to offer a program like this will need to complete a request. They need to complete a form and submit some course materials to us, to our department, and a one-time fee of $90. This isn't something that you have to do every year. At which point, our department staff will evaluate that course and let the school know, does it meet these standards that we've adopted in rule or not? And if not, what do you need to do to get there? And then that will make it much easier. We'll just have a list of schools whose programs we have already recognized. And so students who graduate programs from those schools, there won't be any delay for us to reach out to the schools and try to find out what kind of program they're offering that will delay that student's application. So that is, and it was very important to us that we not impose a administrative burden or the fee on the schools every year. We understand they're busy, they have things to do. And so we want to help them, kind of get this taken care of so they don't have to worry about it year to year unless they really shake up their program in a substantial way. I am going to share my screen. Just a moment. I think I have it zoomed in enough. Let's see, share. I'm just going to walk you through these kind of bit by bit. And what I'd ask is, because I can't see hands, If you have a question, please use the raise hand and Anna will call on you. And then I'll just answer your question as we go through these. I just won't be able to see them. Okay. So here are our rules. You're familiar with them. What we needed to do, this is all the fundamental stuff we have to do in order to make this work. We're adding a definition for a career and technology education program. And what we did is we're using different terms. So you'll see here in 10, career and technology education program, versus number 11, certification training program. We want to make sure, because the statute kind of puts both of these paths under the term certification training program, in order to kind of eliminate confusion and make the rules just much easier to read. What we did here in 11 is he said, this existing certification training program, this came out about 4 years ago. It's a program of education and training consisting of at least 2,000 hours of a combination of classroom instruction, et cetera, et cetera. We want to identify that as one track, and then the career and technology education program as another. And that's just a guidance to the public to say, here are your pathways to becoming a certified technician. Number one, you put in X number of months under a contractor. Number two, you take this certification training program. And number three, you complete a career and technology education program. So that's going to be those high school and college courses. Just to clarify those various paths. So you'll see a renumbering of a lot of these definitions, no change. And then we get to in-person supervision. I mentioned that we've got minors who are going to be 16 and 17 years old who will be able to hold a registered, who will be able to be a registered technician. And simply, we define that in-person supervision, and we'll get to this later a little bit, supervision of air conditioning and refrigeration maintenance work. Of course, that's work provided by a technician, provided while physically present at the same location as the person being supervised. And then in number 24, this is, once again, just one of the definitions we needed to specify that's used in the statute a lot. Institution of higher education, just think about it as it could be a publicly funded college, university, privately funded college, university, one of, technical college, that kind of thing. All right, moving on down. I think that's the end of the definitions. I mentioned earlier that a contractor who serves as the instructor for this course, what we've provided in rule is that a person who provides us proof that they have served as an instructor of one of these educational programs may receive 2 hours of continuing education for each completed academic semester of instruction. If you're teaching multiple courses, you still get 2 hours. And we structured it that way. We know that some instructors are going to teach more than one course, but we also want to make sure that instructors are getting their continuing education from other sources as well, to make sure they are educated in changes in the industry and the various codes. There was a change to the exemption language also in the statute. And that means basically a student who is in a certification training program or a career and technology education program doesn't have to hold a technician registration in order to perform work in that program, and that's provided by statute. Next, we added a responsibility of the contractor, and that is embodied in number 12. The contractor has an obligation to, at all times, provide in-person supervision, either directly or via a certified technician, to a person who is younger than 18 years of age and is offering to act or acting as a technician, a registered technician. On the fees, a couple of notes. First off, G, even though underlined, it is not new. Just for organizational purposes, we moved it to the bottom of the rule. Here in E, we're talking about, I mentioned that process where a private high school or a college will need to ask TDLR to look at their course and determine whether or not it's compliant with the rules. That's a one-time fee of $90, and that's comparable to the fee that we charge an institution that wants to have their certification training program recognized by TDLR. So that's consistent. Again, that's a one-time fee. F, and this is, I also mentioned this earlier, the department will waive the renewal fee for a contractor who provides proof of having served as an instructor for at least one academic semester. Again, that is, we are required to adopt that portion by statute as well. Just doing some mechanics here in 75.120, to obtain an air conditioning and refrigeration technician certification, an applicant must have, and here are the 3 tracks. So the first one is going to be if you complete the career and technology education program that we recognize below. The second would be completing a certification training program. You'll also note this previously read completed a certification training program within the previous 48 months. That was actually stricken from the statute by House Bill 1859. So now the options are just period. At the time of application, you've either completed this program we're adopting here today, you've completed a certification training program, which is the program that was adopted 4 years ago, or you have performed 24 months. Yes.
This is Brian Francis. Can you go scroll back up to the waiver of the renewal fee?
Yes.
Just wanted to read that real quick. Okay, so is that renewal fee waived for a person who does 1 semester of instruction or academic semester within the renewal period? Or I'm reading that to where it looks like if they did it once, they could have it waived forever, as opposed to in that 2-year period,
right?
If they perform that task for that renewal cycle that's coming up, they get a waiver. But they don't do it the next time. It looks like we would still be waiving because they could prove that they did it, just not
right
most recently. So it's just a thought. I don't tell me if I'm reading it wrong or too narrow.
No, I think, and that we've kind of grappled that question before, and there, we may need to tweak the wording a little bit, just to make sure that we don't run into that problem. And I'm making a note of it.
I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. That's just offering. I'm just adding it for context, and I'll leave it up to the wisdom of the board. But I just wanted to put that in front of you.
Thank you, Brian. So back to 75-120. So that's we're just clarifying the 3 different paths to the technician certification. And now we're getting down to the good stuff. The 2 new rules, 75-124 and 125. And this is where we talk about the requirements for the career and technology education programs. And I typically don't put an explanation at the beginning of rules. But in drafting this, I thought it would be good to provide this background to someone who wasn't familiar, to understand what TDLR's obligations are in this area. And so subsection A, what it really does is just spell out what House Bill 1859 requires us to do in regard to these programs. And number 1 is we're required to establish standards for the essential knowledge and skills of these programs offered in Texas public high schools. And the second prong would be determine on a case-by-case basis whether programs offered by private high schools and institutions of higher education are similar to the CTE programs offered in public high schools. So it's a couple of different things. We just wanted to spell that out. The standards are going to be the same, but the bill does require us to do both of those things. And so here in B is where we get down to,
Hey, Doug?
yes.
Doug, if I could, you've said a few times throughout this that everything seems to be worded and geared toward high school, but you've also mentioned TCSC and community colleges and universities. How are those tied into this, or are they at all?
They are, as a matter of fact. It's really interesting. I think the focus of the bill was to make sure these programs are able to be offered in colleges. In high school more commonly, but also said that a college, whatever standards we adopt here today, a college will be able to look at our standards and create a course based on our standards. And there's an interesting provision of the bill that says a college can certainly do that, but their program cannot be more stringent than that of a public high school.
Okay, because I just haven't seen that yet.
Oh, yes, it'll be coming up here in just a minute.
Thank you.
And so what we're really stating here is, in A, these are the things that we must do, and one of them is to establish the standards. And here's where the standards really start in B. And then we've got kind of connecting all the dots here right after B.
And Doug, this is Brian Francis. To Mr. Yelovic's comment, it really hooks them in under A2, is where the institutions of higher education are hooked in, saying, oh, A1 is for the high schools. Oh, and by the way, private school or institution of higher education, if you want to do it as well, then we'll determine that it's similar to A1. So that's the hook. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, and there's some more specific language making that connection here in just a moment. And so in B, what we are doing, just so you're aware, so I mentioned the courses that we recognized that were available in the TEA system. The essential skills and the essential knowledge and skills for each of those courses, those appear in rules under the TEA chapters. And so what we're doing here today is, we're saying, first of all, the program must be designed to ensure that students obtain the essential knowledge and skills set out in the following cross-referenced rules of the Texas Education Agency. And I'll go through the rest of B here in a second. But so for each of 1 through 4, these are the names of the courses that TEA has recognized. And if you look at, so it references Texas Administrative Code Title 19, Part 2, Chapter 130, Subchapter B, Section 130.43. That is so the user, the reader, can go find those essential skills and knowledge and review them. And so that's where all of that information is contained, and we can certainly go through those if you'd like in just a minute. But we also specified, we're going to specify the number of credits that must be earned for each of these steps. We may need to make a change to that, and I will come identifying perhaps total hours of instruction, and we'll get back to that. One of the interesting things here is that we also state that students enrolled in courses identified in subsections 2 and 3 below must be provided hands-on practical instruction, including interactive lab work, for at least 60% of total classroom time. And so those courses would be number 2 and number 3 here: heating, ventilation, and air conditioning and refrigeration technology 1 and 2. And those are the courses where the students are taking the deeper dive. Yes, they're learning specific theory, but then they're getting the hands-on instruction. We identified, the work group identified the 60% total hands-on time to be appropriate. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, for HVAC Technology 2, we have written it so that instruction regarding sheet metal and fiberglass ductwork is optional. And then lastly, so we've mentioned Principles of Construction 1 credit, HVAC Technology 1 credit, HVAC Technology 2 credits, and then we get down to the practicum. And this again is the portion where a student will go and work for a contractor during the school day for X number of hours. And so the rules require 3 credits for that student in that setting. And there's some further detail here in A and B. So A, at least 80% of a student's time in a practicum must be spent outside of the classroom and working under the supervision of a department licensed air conditioning and refrigeration contractor. And the reason that can't be 100% is that because this is a practicum, when we spoke to TEA, we understood that the school, a representative from the school is going to need to pull the student in with their instructor to talk about what the student is working on, to get progress reports, to make sure that the student is doing what they're supposed to do. And so that's why But in talking about how this is actually implemented, it did appear safely that 80% of that time is going to be able to be spent working under the contractor, with some remainder doing those administrative type things where the contractor and the student get together with a counselor or some other school representative to talk about job progress.
Hey, Doug, are these guys I'm just curious, do you get paid while you're in high school doing this?
There are paid and unpaid options depending on where you live and what access to contractors there are, and what contractors have agreed to work with the school. But there are both routes.
So they would be insured as an employee, perhaps?
Probably not doing enough. I don't know if they'd be doing enough time to qualify as an employee.
Just if they get hurt on the job, it gets sticky, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I imagine it would. Yes. I think that would raise questions of, whether the student is an employee or one of the, also here in 4B, one of the things we mentioned is that we're requiring that a school who offers a CTE program like this must implement procedures allowing a student to earn course credit work for this practicum portion for work performed outside of the program under the supervision of, it should say, a department licensed air conditioning and refrigeration contractor. So once again, this is your, there's a process, and it looks like there's already some precedent in the public schools for this. I spoke to TEA earlier today about the mechanics of this, but essentially the student would be able to apply to the school and say, I am going to be working for contractor X this summer. I anticipate working 20 hours per week for 10 weeks. And I'm going to receive however many credits for that, 1 credit, 0.8 credits, whatever. But the school will need to kind of take care of the mechanics of how that works. But it looks like there is some precedent, and it's not going to be something a school is not handled, not prepared to handle. And that option is really there for those students who might only have time for 2 credits of practicum in their school day. But as I mentioned, we increased the required number of practicum credits to 3, just out of a concern. We wanted to make sure that these students were getting enough field experience while a reasonable but increased amount of experience in the field while they're in these high school programs. And so C simply states part of the statute which says TDLR cannot recognize one of these programs unless it's instructed by a licensed air conditioning and refrigeration contractor or a certified technician whose certification was issued on or after September 1st, 2018. And that was the effective date of the bill that changed the standards for a certified technician.
Doug, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No.
Mr. Campion has his hand up.
Yes, Mr. Campion.
Back to direct supervision, that kind of ties in with credit and all that. And so the student who wishes to work part-time or voluntary or whatever the case may be with a air conditioning contractor, to validate that credit, would it have to be signed by a supervisor with some type of credentials or the licensee of that establishment?
Off the top of my head, I feel like I would feel comfortable. I mean, you can imagine a couple of different kinds of business formats, right? We can, might be a smaller shop where the contractor is signing off on everything, or it could be a larger, a chain or something like that, where perhaps a non-contractor employee might sign off on that. Personally, I would be comfortable as long as the company signs off on it and warrants that work was performed under the supervision of a licensed contractor and gives us the information of who. I think that would be satisfactory, but we can always look at that, if we feel like it needs to come directly from the contractor.
And part B to that question, I should have set it up front. I didn't mean to be a loaded question. Was that is this student able to work for? Because I live in a small community. We all know all the air conditioning guys around here, and I've already vetted some of them where we're always willing to work. They might not always have work every day for all their team members, but at least want to volunteer and pitch in. Does the possibility exist that this individual, this contractor, have to be signed up in the program, or can he, kind of leads back to the first part of that question, where can he work for company A for one weekend or company B for another, as long as he's vetted appropriately on a document?
I'll leave it this way. I think what's going to happen in practice is this. If a student wants to get some sort of academic credit for work that they perform after hours, after school, or during the summer, they're just going to have to essentially apply to their school and say, here's the kind of work that I'm doing. And the school is going to say, okay, great. Based on that, we anticipate giving you X number of credits. And so for a student who's working for a couple of different companies, maybe, I think they'd probably just have to, do that document twice, but just make sure that they are providing the correct information that the school would have to follow up on, of course, and verify that employment. But I think you could work for more than one company.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. And here in C, yes. So we mentioned that they have to be instructed by these types of licensees, or else it can't be recognized. That's statutory. Here is the kind of catch-all provision. A CTE program offered by an institution of higher education may not be more stringent than a program offered by a public high school. And here's where it all comes together for the private schools and the institutions of higher education. The department will recognize an educational program offered by a private high school or institution of higher education as a career and technology education program for purposes of Rule 75-120. I'm going to scroll back up real quick just so you can see. That's this one. So what we're saying is a program offered by a private high school or an institution of higher education will be recognized as this if the following conditions are met. If the department determines that the educational program substantially complies with the requirements of this section. And all that means, in super plain talk, is that the course has to be instructed by a licensed contractor or a certified technician whose certification was issued after this period. And the courses are going to have to ensure that the student gets the essential skills and knowledge that are laid out in these 4 courses: Principles of Construction, HVAC 1 and 2, and then there's a substantial practical/practicum component as part of the program. So that's tying off that loop. If a private high school or a institution of higher education designs their course in compliance with these, we will recognize it as a pathway to the technician certification.
So if a junior college or a community college created a course and you deemed it more, above the standards that you set, being a higher education thing, wouldn't you expect it to be a little more rigorous for someone who's 20 or 21 years old?
Would I, without this bill's guidance? Absolutely. And I think that's one of those things that colleges are going to have. They're going to have to figure out. We don't have. I wanted to repeat that provision of the bill. And so what I think schools may do, this is just guesswork at this point, but perhaps craft. This is our pathway to the certification technician. But if you want to learn more and get more hours toward and more instruction toward your contractor license, then you should take course number 2. That would be my guess. But so there could be kind of a I think about like trim levels on a car, that kind of thing. Could be here's the base specification, and then if you want to do more and spend more time and more focus, great, you can do that in this other course. But yeah, so that is one of those things that schools are going to have to adjust to. Absolutely.
Mr. Campion has his hand up.
Yes, sir.
Maybe just more of a statement. I think the at the higher education college level implemented program, obviously we are always want to hit the easy button. I don't know if it's hypothetically, this is a hypothetical response where would there be some criteria that we could add to the language? And it's a big if there, based on the bill, where a GED would disqualify someone for joining into the high school program, or a high school diploma would disqualify. I'm a veteran, so I qualify for a lot of programs, and there's some that I just absolutely don't qualify for. It's just part of the rules of life, right? So could there be something to that effect? Because if I'm 20 or so, like Mr. Yelovitz has mentioned, I want the easy button. I'm going to join the easier program so I can get to my place faster, right? But you know, could there be something in there? This is just a hypothetical. Throw it out there. Response.
I'm not sure, and let me kind of tell you the first thing that came to my mind when you asked that question, and it may not be on point, and if not, I apologize. But one of the things we also are anticipating is that there could be a number of different ways in which students complete this path. You know, a lot of schools are implementing dual credit programs where they'll contract with, you know, TSTC, for example, and take college courses while in high school, right? And so what if I took principles of construction in 10th grade, and then realized that maybe there wasn't a program that I wanted to take that was being offered by my public high school, but I wanted to take a course. I wanted to take HVAC Technology 1 and 2, but I wanted to take them through TSTC. We're trying to design this so that to really accommodate all those different ways that a student could complete these courses. So either in that dual credit path, or even imagine that a student you know, decides late in their high school career that they want to focus on HVAC. Maybe they, in their senior year, they take HVAC Technology 1, but they want to continue. And they go over to a local college who has adopted this program, and they can start at the next course, the HVAC Technology 2, and then they complete that and they do their practicum. And so we would look at that as having completed the program, as long as we had, you know, as long as we had their, you know, their high school transcript showing that they did the first part, and then their college transcript showing that they did the latter part. Does that get you closer?
Yeah,
to the
no, the reason why I ask is because I think on the last meeting that we had on this, there was an educator, I'm not going to mention which one, but I think they mentioned something to the fact that they contracted out that exactly what you're referring to one of the local programs. And so, and you know, Mr. Yelovich's question kind of struck another question that said, okay, what would be that criteria? If they're already doing it at the high school level, then that kind of meets the criteria. We know where that student is at. But, you know, once they get past a certain point, then it kind of leaves an open Pandora's box. Maybe, maybe not, but it's a start, right? You got to start somewhere. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Doug, I'm just afraid item D has us teaching high school classes at a junior college. And if I'm a junior college administrator, that bothers me.
I understand that completely, and I just want to make I hear you loud and clear. It is a mandatory provision of House Bill 1859,
Yeah.
And so, you know, we're really going to have to.
I think the thing to keep in mind here is that irrespective of the age of the person, the skills and knowledge do not change.
And that's a great point, Mr. Bittner. Is, you know, I think I'll put it this way.
I don't care if you're 35 and you want to be
Yeah.
a certified technician. It's the same. If you're 16 or 35, it doesn't matter.
I think the question ultimately is going to be, I think what we mean, the way that I'm reading that stringency language is, you know, if our commission, after your help, you know, identifies these 4 courses, and we go into each one and we look at the long list of topics and knowledge, if a institution of higher education has added kind of a 5th category of things, or extra time or skills to get to this certification, I think then that would violate the bill. But teaching what we have here in 1 through 3 particularly in a different or more advanced way, I don't think would violate that stringency provision. So there's a little wiggle room, at least by my estimation. But yes, I do understand where you're coming from. It's just it is in the bill.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that an institute of higher education couldn't offer something in addition to what the core curriculum is. They just can't fail somebody because of their inability to complete it.
Brian France speaking. I got a feeling that those higher education institutions are going to figure out where they can fit in and how they're going to be able to make this work. And we'll probably be here in a year with this under our belt, and we'll have an opportunity to evaluate it. And lo and behold, there'll be another legislative session that kicks in January 2025, that if we need to tweak it based on what we've learned from that first academic semester or so, we'll have that opportunity to do it. But I think Mr. Compion said it best. This is a starting place.
Thank you, Brian. Does anyone have any other questions about this rule that we have just gone over? 75-124. We will get down to the last part then, which is just the kind of behind the scenes functions. And it just states that a private high school or an institution of higher education that implements one of these CTE programs must request a determination from TDLR whether their program substantially complies with our students, because in order to be recognized, you've got to provide an instruction through one of those, and then paying that $90 fee. And so once the school receives a positive determination, so that means once they've received word that their program complies, they don't have to renew this request every year. They just simply must inform the department on a form or a website that we provide of any substantial change to the program. And we don't really foresee a lot of that happening, because it doesn't seem to be happening for other programs. And of course, we have a couple of catch-alls for our worst case scenarios, just in case. If we find that an educational program does not substantially comply with these requirements, for example, we find out that a program has been taught by someone who is not a licensee. Let's say it was taught by a licensee initially, and we find out that it hasn't been, we can rescind our determination that the program meets the requirements. That would be required by law. And then it just says that if we make that decision, that's not a contested case, and may not be appealed. So it's not subject to the Administrative Procedure Act like cases against our licensees.
Doug, does it allow for guest speakers in the class being led by that licensed person? Like, let's say an equipment manufacturer was a guest speaker to talk about, whatever it was. Is that allowed under this?
I would certainly think so, yes. Yeah, it's just, the primary instructor is going to need to be a licensee. And then certainly, hopefully that licensee will expose the students to all sorts of different types of knowledge, but generally it's going to be under their, they're going to take the lead on that kind of thing and bring in those guests as necessary. That is the walkthrough of these rules. Are there any questions? Just want to make sure while I still have it up on the screen. I want to mention a couple of things, or maybe more than a couple. So I mentioned that I talked with TEA recently, this morning. And so there are a few changes, I think, to the text that we're going to need to make to get us exactly where we need to get. And one of those is the manner in which I think we mentioned here in 75-124. We're talking about the practicum component, and we say a high school or institution of higher education must implement procedures allowing the student to earn course credit for work. We may need to provide a little more guidance there. I'm waiting to see what we hear back from the public what we hear back from educators about that. That's a real potential for modification at a later step. And kind of the last, I think, rework. One of the things that I have kind of been made aware of, and this is why it was very helpful to have TEA involved in these discussions, is understanding, as we have moved away from this 180-day number of minimum number of days of instruction, it's become more flexible. Was understanding that the term credit is also flexible, and that you can't necessarily, if we say 1 credit, that doesn't necessarily mean a student has been physically present in a seat for 2 semesters. What that mean that could mean that a student has taken a test, an AP test in principles of construction, for example, and has passed it and can get a credit. And so that's not what we intend to do here today. So I just want to put that out there to say that, what I think what the work group was going for was looking at a traditional model where 1 credit equals a year of instruction. So a half credit would be a semester, but also understanding that perhaps a student could order their schedule, that they take, 2 hours per day for 1 semester and get a credit. But I think that what we were really aiming to do was provide a minimum number of hours to be receiving education. And what's really interesting is that there is a law that says that TEA cannot actually specify the number of hours a student has to be in a seat to get a credit. But we can, which is interesting. So we can actually provide guidance, and that's provide guidance to the schools in terms of how much instruction we expect a student to go through for each of these. So, for example, if these rules went out today and it said 1 credit, and a school decided, maybe there's a great exam out there that tests your knowledge in this area, and a school decided that, if you pass that test, you get a credit for this course. Well, that's not what we want. And so what we probably want to do here is, instead of saying 1 credit, we probably want to specify a number of clock hours of instruction. Once again, I know that when talking to TEA, I asked the question, which is, all right, understanding that, you can't provide me a definite number, give me a ballpark figure of how many hours a student is going to be in a seat to get 1 credit. That's a loaded question. It's not exactly how they see things. And my thinking was, recently, the school year was a minimum of 180 days. So I thought, well, let's just say for 1 credit, it's 180 hours. And then when I was speaking to TEA, they said, well, it probably doesn't need to be that high because of, imagine that we said 180 hours, but a school had, was affected by wildfires and their students were out for a couple of weeks and didn't get 180 hours of instruction. And so rather than putting kind of that 180 hours for 1 credit here, TEA actually recommended that we just say, up in B, we say what our expectation for the number of clock hours is for 1 through 4. And so the number that I came up with, based on, if we just say 180 days a year, 1 hour per day, that's 180 hours for 1 credit. And so the calculation I came up with for this total, assuming the 3 credits of practicum, is 1,260 clock hours. And so what I'd like to do is just add a sentence here on B, and we may need to kind of rework B to be a little more reader friendly, that just says the total time of instruction must equal 1,260 hours or more, obviously. we have to craft that language, but just to provide that guidance here, since there's no mechanism through which TEA can actually tell their schools, you have to be your student has to be in the seat this long to get 1 credit. And so if we put that minimum number of clock hours of instruction here, we're ensuring that, we're giving proper guidance to schools that they know that they can't do this. We put these things in here about, hands-on instruction. They're going to know they can't do this simply virtually. And they're going to need to, they'll have at least a number where they can make sure that they're they're hitting that target of instruction. But anyway, we may need to do that rather than say 1 credit, since 1 credit can mean a number of things. That was a nuance I wasn't aware of until very recently. So I guess what I'm asking, I think if we use that number that I just mentioned, that 1,260, that is based on just our idea that the work group had, is that 1 credit equals 2 semesters of attending school and being in a classroom. So that would be kind of the one addition I would recommend making, rather than just putting it in terms of credits. I know that's complicated, but I think putting those hours there will just vastly simplify that and provide clearer guidance. Clearer guidance to the schools. And the good thing is, we'll publish that number, and then we'll hear back from the schools through public comment, and we'll know if that is in the ballpark of where that number needs to be, and if not, we can reduce it with your input, of course. Any other questions?
Hey Doug, this is Dolores. I just want to thank you and the entire team for the tireless hour that y'all put into this. And so I always try to end something with a little history and a little story. I remember after I finished infantry training and got to my second duty station, all the team members from the North OR were coming into the Corps there with their A&P or A, they had airframes and power plants. They had either their P or their A or their generals already out of the way. So it always gave them a leg up, fresh out of high school. And so I'm really passionate about this. As while we here in the South at that time, the best we were going to get is small engine repair, right? So, but even that was a start, right? And so I think that this is very valuable, and I want to just share that with the entire team that, I've been out of the service for 45 years plus. And so that always resonates with me when I take over some type of mentorship program with a young student, and just trying to figure out where he lies and where he may want to be in life. And, life changes, right? So great start. Thank you to the entire team who was on and all the members who participated in this. Just want to share that with you.
Thank you much, Mr. Compion. It's been a huge group effort, and we've gotten a lot of help. And in drafting the rules, I've gotten so much help from compliance, from E&E, from TEA, from TSTC. It's been really helpful. It's been a great team effort, and it's taken a long time to get these right. Just to make sure we've heard from everybody that we're not missing anything. That was really important to us. We didn't want to put out a product that was going to cause problems for schools, and that was going to require them to rethink the way they were doing business, unless we just absolutely had to. One thing that I'm getting kind of a chuckle out, I just got a very timely and pointed message asking me not to inject the clock hour requirement into these rules, because that apparently for some of our other programs has been kind of problematic. And so I think I'd like to propose then that what we do, perhaps what we do I'm going to share the rules again just for a moment. Let's see, where are they? So back here where we talked about the various courses, and we talked about 1 credit, perhaps we could just simply spell out that we mean 2 semesters of instruction, and maybe specify later or in B somewhere that a student may not obtain hours of credit simply through examination. That this has to be there is a schedule for this, and it can't be bypassed by simply taking an exam or something like that. So I have heard that loud and clear. And that's kind of the way I'll proceed unless I hear an objection. So please feel free. All right. So if there are no more questions, and if there are, certainly ask them. But I'd just like to ask the board today, what I'd like to ask for is a motion to publish these rules in the Texas Register to begin the public comment period. And I'd also appreciate it if in your authorization, you give us a little latitude to make some what I'll say non-substantive changes, just to make sure that we get everything right. Kind of based on our discussions today, some of them are substantive, but any other kind of minor tweaking we need to make. But also to make those changes we talked about, which is spell out the number of semesters of instruction versus credit hour, that kind of thing. But we'd like to go ahead and get these published for the public comment period with your approval. And we have Mr. Compion, your hand.
I make a motion to move forward with the open comments and give y'all the authority to make any lateral movements as necessary for the rulemaking. Did that cover it?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Dave Yelovich, second.
Doug, I wanted to let you know that Mr. Graves had to leave the meeting. His iPad died. So that will leave us with 4 members instead of 5.
Okay.
We still have a quorum? I'm sorry, this is Dolores. We still have a quorum?
No, sir.
No, we don't. Quorum would be 5. I don't think that hamstrings us necessarily. We've had situations like this before.
Mm-hmm.
It gives me comfort that the members we have present today seem, I don't want to presume anything, but seem on board. I think probably what I'll ask you to do is to go ahead and vote. And that will give us some guidance as to how we handle it from here. If it turns out that, it's 2-2, we'll have some more talking to do. But we cannot have an official action without a quorum, but we can certainly still go through the motions and we can get your opinions and feedback through the form of a vote.
Is it possible to get Mr. Graves' concurrence with the motion just subsequent to this meeting? Understanding that it's just a communications issue.
I think he will need to be on camera during the time he takes a vote.
Okay.
Can we get him on his phone? Because I had to do a meeting on my phone once. It actually worked out really well.
If we need to take a brief recess to get him, we can certainly do that.
Yes, sir. I'll try to contact him.
I'll say if we could, if possible, please, sir.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Why don't we?
We're just almost there, and it'd be nice to be able to move this over.
Mr. Bittner, how about we maybe, Anna, how much time do you think would be reasonable?
Probably just 5-10 minutes.
Okay, I'll check back with you, Anna, at 12:25. And then do you want to aim to start at 12:25, resume at 12:25 or 12:30? I want to make sure the public is fully aware of when we're going to resume.
Well, let's just say 12:30, just to be
Okay.
safe.
Great. Then I'd like to ask us just, let's go into recess, and we can't have any deliberations during that period. Preferably, I know we don't have a quorum, but I'd still rather
We can still stay connected, can't we?
Yes, sir.
We can, yes.
Sir.
Great.
You can turn off your camera if you'd like.
I'm going to grab a drink. I'll see you in just a few minutes. Thanks.
Thank y'all so much.
12:29, so we need to, it's 12:30.
I have
Well, Mr.
12:30.
Graves is not in yet. I don't know if y'all want to give him a couple minutes or
Sure.
continue waiting for him.
We'll
Yeah.
wait for him.
Okay.
Could we discuss H and I while we're waiting?
Sure thing. Let me bring them back.
If Mr. Graves comes back on, we can stop and bring him in.
Perfect.
Okay.
I'll let y'all know when he pops up.
So,
Which
with regard,
sections, Mr. Yelovich?
No, I was going to say the agenda items H and I.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay.
Our future stuff.
I was wondering, I was like, I didn't recall having that many subsections. All right.
so can we go ahead and move on then while we're waiting for Jimmy and get a recommendation for agenda items for the next board meeting?
It sounded to me, Doug Jennings, General Counsel, sounded to me for TDLR that we want to talk about the refrigerant issue. I've already spoken to Laura Pefferly about that, and she's going to reach out to Mr. Weatherly and Mr. Smart and try to bring you some info. Is there anything specific you'd like to do or cover?
No, I think that everything that we've covered in this meeting and discussed needs to be on the agenda. With regard to
Looks like Mr. Graves has joined us.
Apologies.
Yeah, I'm trying to charge my battery up, but
okay. So I was going to call for a motion and a second, and then a vote. And I think we got the motion. We have the second, and now we just need a roll call vote on whether to go ahead and move forward and publish the proposed amendments for public comment.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I can do that. Mr. Graves, I just want to let you know that there was a motion to publish the proposed rules on the Texas Register for public comment with the substantive changes based on today's conversation. That motion was done by Mr. Compion and seconded by Mr. Yelovich. So I'm going to go ahead and do a roll call vote for y'all.
and I was just getting ready to make the motion when my battery died. So if it's up to me, I'm going to say aye.
Okay, thank you very much. Dave Yelovich,
Aye.
David Morris,
Aye.
Dolores Compion,
Aye.
and presiding officer Jerry Bittner.
Aye.
The motion passes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's move back then on to item H and see if there were any more agenda items that are recommended for the next meeting.
Yeah, I don't know if this needs to be on this, Dolores. I don't know if this needs to be on the agenda items, but wanted another classification there on the licensing examination pass thing. I don't know if that'd be an agenda item or not, but wanted another category in there.
Mr. Chairman, we'll definitely have that covered in the report or the education examination. So we'll have it in the staff report, making sure that we identify the first time pass rate as well as the overall pass rate.
Thank you.
All right. With that, we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item I for discussion of date, time, and location for the next board meeting.
Great. I have some information for the on this, and haven't been able to talk to you yet about it, Anna. But we'll get into the details. We're not making any decisions today. Texas State Technical College has gotten in touch with us and has offered to host the board on either June the 10th or the 11th to host your next board meeting in person. To those of you who could attend at their campus in Waco. That is their biggest campus. Couple of cool things about that is that they would love to give you a tour in the morning of their instruction to show you what their students are doing on a day-to-day basis, the type of instruction they're receiving. And interestingly enough, counselors, high school counselors from all over the state will be on their campus in Waco on the 10th and 11th. And we'll be able to, you'd be able to interact with them, ask them questions. So just a really good opportunity to ask questions of the educators who are out there doing this and recommending and implementing these programs. And so we will touch base with you to see if you are interested in doing that. You know, whether if you could not make it there in person, there will still be a virtual option, just like we're doing today. But we want to get in touch with you and find out if that would be something you'd be interested in. So that is an option. Those dates are limited to the 10th and 11th of June. I think we have more flexibility if we're not meeting there. Mr. Yelovic, yes.
Hey, Doug. I was going to say, I'm also on the plumbing board, and we had a meeting in that exact same place that you're talking about. And I would encourage us to, everyone could attend. It's really a nice place. Although you'll walk away saying, man, I wish our meeting room was like this. It's really nice. So that should be a
I'm
good
glad
meeting.
to hear that. Great, thank you. So we'll reach out and try to coordinate that with your schedules to see if that's an option you'd like to pursue. So otherwise, I think we're looking, you know, at a meeting early to mid-June that we could do virtually if attending in person in Waco is not something that people want to do, but it does sound like there might be some interest. So I'm happy to hear that.
With that, we'll go ahead and move on to item J, which is adjournment. And it is 12:36 p.m. on my clock, and we'll call this meeting adjourned.